Bruce and John Kelly were speakers at Cult Awareness Network's annual convention in 1997, which resulted in Cult Awareness Network being recognized as a group that employs cult mind control manipulation. John and Teresa continue to field inquiries from families that speak on the subject of cult manipulation. Bruce mounted, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to let you introduce yourself, and we'll get right on with cult mind control, the state of art manipulation. Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you, Steve. I'm going to give you just a little bit of background because I want to frame what I'm going to say within the context of that background. I graduated from Hamlin University just down the road in 1969 with a draft number of 78. That was a lethal combination, so I dodged the draft. I applied for and was accepted to the Naval Aviation Program. I went into the Navy in April of 71, April of 70, received my wings on Friday the 13th, August of 1971. Found myself on the way to Vietnam. I arrived in Vietnam just in time for Linebacker 2. I flew the lead mission of Linebacker 2. Look it up. It was the most intense war, or air war, in the whole Vietnam era. I quit counting surface-to-air missiles at 50. After that, it wasn't worth counting. Only one directed at me, but that was personal. So, by the grace of God, I stand before you. I was not a Christian then. By the way, we lose more people to the carrier aviation environment than we lost to combat. We lost 1 to combat, we lost 4 to accidents around the carrier. So a naval career flying off of aircraft carriers is a dangerous thing. I left the Navy in 1977, returned to Minneapolis, and with my wife, a movie came out called The Late Great Planet Earth. I went to see the movie with our neighbors, and it started me thinking. And it led to a reading of Bible, and I was reading in Isaiah 53. My wife was a Christian. I said, "Have you ever read this? This is amazing stuff." And over the course of that winter, I accepted Christ. My wife gave me this Bible in 1982. The salesman at Northwestern Bookstore said it has an encyclopedic index. If he ever teaches or gives talks, he would really find that helpful. And he'd never do that. So here we are. A little while later, some Jehovah's Witnesses appeared at my door, and I thought, these people are really strange. And I was well enough educated where I understood what they were saying, but I couldn't get through to them. I prayed to God that if He would bring them back to my door, I would start an outreach to the witnesses. They never returned. But they returned to the door of someone with whom I was going to church, and he says, "I've got some witnesses coming over. Would you like to come and help me?" So I went over there, and they appeared. And so that was the start of the whole process. I became an expert on Jehovah's Witness theology. It is a great honor that the witnesses in the 5-state area referred to me as the exorcist.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that an ironic title? I won that by stumping a couple of their elders and their wives, where there were 2 young boys who were thinking about joining the witnesses, and they said, "Well, whoever wins the debate, we'll go with that." And I won that debate. The elder stood up, tipped his chair over, and said, "In 25 years, nobody has ever done this to me." Okay, where do you go with that? But they never left the witnesses. There's something wrong, because I could win every single argument with Jehovah's Witnesses and not make a dent. Long story short, Steve Hassan wrote the book Combating Cult Mind Control, brought up the whole concept of mind control. Mind control is a biblical concept. Did you know that? Mind control is documented in psychology, and that's really what we're going to be talking about today. because I can exit counsel somebody out of the Lyndon LaRouche political cult by talking about how Jehovah's Witnesses recruit and retain their members. A woman that stood up and said, we need to start eating our babies. Did you see that news story? Lyndon LaRouche. They're all around us. So that's what we're going to be going through here today. I have worked with Jehovah's Witnesses, the Boston Movement, the Lamoni, Iowa cult, 30 members of a boutique cult in Kentucky, Mormons, Children of God, Chung Mu Kwan Karate, Linda LaRouche, the Moonies, and several other boutique cults which are popping up all over the place. I no longer do exit counselings, but I speak and educate as much as I possibly can. I'm going to try to keep the sea stories to a minimum in the interest of holding on to the time. By the way, did you know what the difference is between a fairy tale and a sea story? A fairy tale begins once upon a time. Sea story begins, no kidding, this really happened. Mind control. Sounds pretty spooky. I'm not going to go into one of the handouts. I'm going to assume that you can read. This is about the alcoholic system that is present in nearly every cult, and in family systems, and in organizations. I'll let you read that for yourself. On the back side, handouts for you to give young kids heading off to college, questions to ask if they're asked to join a group. These questions will drive any cult recruiter crazy. And finally, the pamphlet that we're going through today on mind control. I'm going to cover the 3 center panels of that. So if you would please return your seat backs and tray cables to the full and upright position, we're going to launch. Mind control. I have 3 objectives here. To answer what is mind control, understand how it is used, recognize its use, and forewarn others. The biblical case for mind control, there are really 2. One is by smooth talk and flattery, they deceive the minds of naive people. We think of naive people as dumb people. That's not the case. It is people who do not have a worldly knowledge. That's why the education that you're talking about is so essential. We have to understand the gospel. Secondly, Galatians. You foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you? Did you know that there's only one spot in the whole Bible where that word bewitched appears? And it's right there, Galatians 3:1. It means to lead into error through feigned praise and evil arts. Feigned praise is the way I get close to you. I pretend to be your best friend forever so that I can manipulate you. That is the biblical case for mind control. Ray Tell gives us another piece. He had a theory that said we move from fluid intelligence as children to crystallized intelligence if we're not careful as adults. Children learn. They decide what the world is, constantly testing it. Have you ever heard the phrase, if they didn't know it in 1950, they don't know it today? That's crystalline intelligence. The challenge is we have to keep learning. Now, the cults concentrate on the ability to crystallize a small portion of your mind, typically surrounding their teachings. By the way, there are fraternal cults, political cults, psychoanalytical cults. There are certainly religious cults and social cults. They come in all flavors. Their ideology is wildly different. The manipulation they use is identical. That's why a concept of mind control becomes extremely important. How many of you heard the term cognitive dissonance theory? Anybody heard that? You know where it came from? It came from a university professor named Leon Festinger studying a UFO cult in Ohio. Isn't that wild? That theory is wildly accepted. Nobody knows where it came from. The UFO cult leader was getting automatic writing sent to her from aliens. They predicted the end of the earth. The group of people gathered at the leader's house at the appointed time Fessinger and his students infiltrated the cult, and they thought, I don't think this is probably going to happen. I wonder what's going to happen to the people when the appointed hour arrives and nothing happens. Well, it happened. The fringe members said, I've been duped, and they walked out the door. The committed members went to the leader and said, what does this mean? Think about that. They went back to the leader and said, define my reality for me. So what the leader said is, because you have been faithful, this great tragedy has been averted. If you ever stop being faithful, it will now be on your backs that the world will be destroyed. And they kept on. So the cognitive dissonance theory looks like this. The cognitive triad is your behavior, your thoughts, and your emotions sit in the position that they are in today because of your life experience. You've all experienced dissonance in this cognitive triad, not all, probably one other beside me. Have you ever thought about something that you really wanted but it was too expensive? And you leaned toward it, but you thought, nope, I'm going to be practical. You got that pull going out here, practical. It's a very uncomfortable position because your behavior's going here, your thoughts and emotions are over here, and you finally make the decision, okay, I'm going to do it. It feels good. Everything's come together. Got it. Then comes buyer's remorse. I can tell that there's at least one other person in here who's experienced that. That is cognitive dissonance. So the cult comes along and they typically concentrate on behavior. They try to pull behavior out of position where you are. The children of God would approach a student in the student center and work on them for weeks on end, becoming their absolute instant best friend. Then they would invite them to a meeting of like-minded people. They would drive them out into the countryside, 50 miles from nowhere. They walk into the meeting, everybody is so friendly. Then the leader says, okay, it's prayer time. The student said, prayer time. I didn't know this was a religious thing. And the recruiter would say, oh, I didn't tell you? I'm sorry. I really let you know. Look, I can't take you home right now. I've got to be here. But just so that I don't get embarrassed, would you do me a favor? Would you just fold your hands, close your eyes, bow your head, but don't pray. Don't pray. Behaviors, what am I doing? I'm praying. The student's mind is going crazy. I hate this. 3 hours into that prayer, as the leader is painting these beautiful thought pictures, and all of the people in the room are going, I see it, I see it. The fatigue overtakes that person. They, well, wait a minute, I did see that. Oh, there's another one. Yeah, there's another one. I see it. They have a snapping moment. When that happens, they pull the behavior and their thoughts and emotions are following, and it pulls them into an entirely new position. The cult says, we've got to keep them there. So they can see this because the eyes are dilated, the face is flushed, the person is just kind of, wiped out. The cult leader will come up and say, you get it. I see it. Now, you need to know that because you get it, Satan is going to come after you. And your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, your friends, your relatives are going to tell you that you are with a harmful organization. What's God going to think of you if you believe Satan when they do that? Information control is now built. This is the process of mind control. So the first thing is a recruit. We talked about it. I'm not going to go into great depth. Try to keep us on target as much as possible. This is basically a 4-hour lecture, by the way. But I'm going to assume that you can read the pamphlet. So I'll give you a couple of examples along the way. Deception. You never tell them why you're really there. You never tell them what they're going to have to give up. You keep that from them. I'll give you two examples. Jehovah's Witnesses are wonderful that way. They put it all in writing. Here's the definition of lie. The opposite of truth. Lying generally involves saying something false to a person who is entitled to know the truth. You're going to let your 5-year-old get away with that? They get to decide who is entitled to know the truth. Thus, Scripture shows that for the purpose of protecting the interests of God's cause, it is proper to hide the truth from God's enemies. Who's God's enemies? Anybody who is not in the group. Emotional leveraging and love bombing, the feigned praise, the instant friendship, the false relationship that you really kind of treasure. Exploiting personal crisis. Remember that behavioral triad? When you go to college and you're separated from your social structure, guess what? That whole thing is kicked loose. You're looking for new connections. That's why they go on campus. When a loved one dies, when the marriage problems arise, a new job, anything that upsets that steadiness is a time of vulnerability to cult recruitment. They'll write letters to people who have lost loved ones. They'll appear at the door. Just happen to be coming by, heard about a loved one. Did you know that you can live forever in paradise on earth? Or they'll create a crisis. Anybody here worried at all about the current state of affairs in this world today? If you were not a Christian, well grounded, and willing to leave all of that in God's hands, do you think you might be subject to having someone come to your door and tune you up and turn the heat up on the crisis so that they can get through the door? My favorite one is the witnesses will come up to the door, the young person will answer and they'll say, do your mom and dad allow you to choose what you read? Isn't that perfect? What young person, oh no, they have to approve everything. No. So they get the literature into their hands. The witnesses are terrific at doing this. They'll ask an obscure question. Hey, you've got your family Bible there. Do you find that the word Jehovah is in that Bible? It's not. Well, that's God's name. What are you doing reading a Bible that doesn't have God's name in it? Mine does. Obscure questions. Questions that many people are not properly prepared to answer. All of the answers becomes increasingly important. They have questions to set up the answers that they're going to give. They practice these at the Kingdom Hall. By the way, every single cult does this in a different form. This group that we counseled in Kentucky, 33 people in the group, 3 different cults were represented. As we were going through the material, I'll clean up her statement here a bit, but she stood up and said, do they all go to the same blank school to learn this stuff? Because it was identical with 3 different cults. They shouldn't have any similarity, but the similarities were there. So we've got recruitment. Now we move into programming. How do we move this person fully into whatever we want them to be? This is right out of the pamphlet. We're in the middle panel now. Intent, study, and activity. I'm going to read to you from the NIV. This is an accepted verse that we all agree with. Now, this is eternal life, that they may know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent. Good stuff. How does the New World Translation of Jehovah's Witnesses read it? This means everlasting life. They're taking in knowledge of you, the only true God, and of the one whom you sent forth, Jesus Christ. They turned knowing, relationship, if you will, into works. I have to take in knowledge, constantly taking in knowledge. That's how I get to everlasting life. You'll love this one. Salvation cannot be earned by attendance at meetings or in any other way. It is free, a gift of God. Okay, I like that. That sounds good. Yes, Jehovah God does require efforts on our part if we are to receive his gift of everlasting life. It's a free gift, but here's what you got to earn it and keep it. That's nonsense. But we live in a world that says there's no such thing as a free lunch. It's in our DNA. If it's worth something, you've got to work for it. That's the blessing of Christianity. And it is what they pervert. Of course, the witnesses don't want to leave anything to chance. So once they get this person into studying, they're going to give them the opposer warning. It may be that even close friends or relatives will tell you that they do not like you examining the scriptures. Jesus Christ himself even warned, indeed, a man's enemies will be persons of his own household. We're going to cut the cords of any relationship outside of whatever cult it is so that you will not listen to them. They are constructing logic-type silos in your brain where no interference can penetrate. Guilt, shame, and fear. What's the difference between guilt and shame? Anybody know? We use those words. We don't know what the difference is. Do you want to know? Guilt is feeling bad about what I've done. Shame is feeling bad about what I am. Guilt that has no outlet in the form of grace and forgiveness turns into shame. Shame leaves a person open to manipulation like no other emotion. You offer a shame-based person any way out, they'll take it. Mothers will even give up their 10-year-old daughters to sleep with the cult leader, as we saw with David Koresh. Think about that. How do you overcome the protective instincts of motherhood? These are the processes. Fear. Jehovah's Witnesses predicted Armageddon, 1878, 1914, 1825, 42, and 75. Those are the only major ones. There are 2 or 3 other minor ones in there. I'm going to take you through one of their campaigns, which was 1983. You need to know the Watchtower magazine cover is either a campaign they're running or responding to a problem in the Kingdom Hall. So here we are, April 1st. Wars, a sign of what? Famine. What does it mean? That's April 15th. May, disease, a sign of the last days. Earthquakes, a sign of the end. June, increasing lawlessness. What does it mean? June 15, disobedient parents, a sign of the last days. Fear, a sign of the end. Great campaign. They ended the campaign here. The next slide tells you the results of the campaign. Suicide. There's a better way. They stirred up so much that the shame-based people that were living a false life in the witnesses were killing themselves, believing that Armageddon was going to happen any day. Schedule control and fatigue. If I can't make you bad, I'll make you busy. The witnesses master at this. The amount of time you devote to kingdom preaching and the example you set should show Jehovah and others that you are giving full, wholehearted support to the kingdom. Would whole-souled service is not following the course of least resistance, coasting along with minimum activity. By the way, how much is enough? Does anybody have an answer? How much is enough? Just a little bit more than I have right now, until I get that. But then, how much is enough? It's the perennial question that we ask ourselves. The ideal situation for parents is to have such a fine program outlined for their children that little or no time remains for outside associations. Great stuff program. Keep them isolated so they never get any outside reference for their lives. Attack independent thinking. Busy and happy servants of Jehovah allow no place for the devil or apostate ideas. Fight against independent thinking. We try to teach our children to think independently. It's really important to be able to think independently. Here's what they say. Such thinking is evidence of pride. The Bible says pride is before a crash and a haughty spirit before stumbling. If we get to thinking that we know better than the organization, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society organization, we should ask ourselves, where did we learn Bible truth in the first place? Avoid independent thinking. Satan called into question God's way of doing things. He promoted independent thinking. Satan is the author of independent thinking. I'm going to pass this one up. It's just more of the same. They have so many great examples. You tend to get tied into it. Divine Commission. Divine Commission says, forget about Jesus. I stand in his stead. Isn't it better to talk to somebody with flesh and blood than trying to reach somebody who you can't see? Jehovah poured out his Spirit upon them, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, or the governing body, and assigned them the responsibility of serving as his sole visible channel through whom alone spiritual instruction was to come. Those who recognize Jehovah's theocratic organization, therefore, must recognize and accept this appointment of the faithful and discreet slave and be submissive to it. Every single cult claims absolutism. When a person persists in a way of badness after knowing what is right, and the bad becomes so ingrained that it is an inseparable part of his makeup, then in order to hate what is bad, a Christian must hate the person with whom badness is inseparably linked. Try to connect that up. You know what the miracle was with Jesus Christ? He was absolutely a magnet for sinners. They flocked to him. They wanted to be around him. The purest representation of God on earth loved to surround himself with sinners, so that by his example, they would be converted. Totalism. You'll love this one. I'm going to read the second one, the underlined one. We must hate in the truest sense, which is to regard with extreme and active aversion, to consider as loathsome, odious, filthy, to detest. Surely any haters of God are not fit to live on his beautiful earth. Whoa. Now, I'm a Jehovah's Witness recruiter, and I hit you with that statement up front and said, how would you like to join our organization? But they don't tell you that when you're just being recruited. So now we move into retention. We've got your program, we've got your schedules, we've got all of the teaching, we've got all of the things that are going to make you a true witness. Now we're going to move into retention phase because we're in this for the long haul here. Motive questioning. I'm going to skip to the second one here in the interest of time. Some opposers claim that Jehovah's Witnesses are false prophets. These opponents will say that dates have been set, but nothing has happened. Again, we ask, what is the motive of these critics? Okay, now you predicted the end of the earth in 1878, 1914, 16, 1824, 42, and 75. It didn't happen. What's your motive? The Bible says a false prophet or a prophet gets one bite of the apple. If what they predict in Jehovah's name does not come true, they're put to death. But when you point these things out, they'll say, what's your motive here? They're not going to concentrate on the reality that this is a false prophet organization many times over in their own documentation. Information control. Information control says, I picked this up and I say, oh, wait a minute, that might create doubt. Throw it away. If I don't, God is going to be angry with me. Do you wisely destroy apostate material? Now, what will you do if you are confronted with apostate teaching? Subtle reasonings, claiming that what you believe as one of Jehovah's Witnesses is not the truth. They also call it spiritual pornography, making it not only sinful if you read it, but it is shameful if you read it. Spiritual pornography. Isolation, separation, alienation. No safe place or people outside of the group. Only the group is safe. You'll never let your guard down with anyone outside the group. Everyone outside is to be regarded as a potential recruit or unsafe. By the way, you go out and you try to recruit everybody you know. And what do? Typically, they strong-arm you, they separate from you, and so people are actively fulfilling that prophecy. Coercion. You risk all if you test the truth. The thought of being kicked out of the group that has enslaved you is the motivation that keeps you into the group. Only when the pain of staying in the group is more painful than leaving does the action occur. I ran an ex-member support group for anybody coming out of a cultic system. We had them in all shapes and sizes. This statement was outlined again and again. One of the guys that left the Boston movement said, I walked into the meeting, I walked around, I was feeling lousy. Everybody had this big smile on their face. They looked so happy, and I was horribly unhappy. And I walked into the bathroom and I looked in the mirror. You know what I saw? That same grin on my face. It was a mask. And I realized I've been wearing a mask for years. And that was a key to him getting out of the Laughton movement. Phobias. If you leave the group, all kinds of bad things are going to happen. Somebody leaves the group and they're in a car accident. Guess why that car accident happened? Because they left the group. Never mind the fact that 12 other people in the Kingdom Hall probably had a car accident in the past and they were still in the group. Anything bad that happens in life is related to leaving the group. By the way, you ever heard of self-fulfilling prophecy? A person who believes that something bad is going to happen to them can occasionally manufacture that very thing to happen. Striving for the unreachable. Religious people tend to think of religious life as a path. One end is license, the other is legalism. Trying to find that middle ground in between that. That's not what religious life is all about. Jesus Christ pointed upward and said faith. Because that path down here is human effort. There is nothing you can do that will make God love you more, and there is nothing you can do that will make God love you less. That's the reality of grace. That is the reality of the gift given to us by Jesus. That's why he was absolutely a magnet for sinners. He embodied grace on earth. He never spoke the word grace because he was the embodiment of grace, pointing to faith. When he died on the cross, grace as we know it today, from that substitutional atonement, grace was created. I like to think of it on the wings of the cross. And man was able to lift up from the path of human effort and stand on grace. By the way, the wings of the cross move towards legalism or license. Paul walked into the area where all the idols were in Athens, Greece, and he pointed to the empty pedestal and said, let me tell you about the unknown God. The legalist would go crazy that he would use that as entree. Paul would sit down with the Jews. He would observe every Jewish culture and precept. Those who were about license would have gone crazy that he would have done that. But Paul said, I've become all things to all men that I might win them to Jesus Christ. When you stand on the wings of grace, you have the ability to move. If Paul were here today, who knows? He might dye his hair green and walk around on Hennepin Avenue in order to reach those might not be reachable by any other means. So the gospel literally means good news. I am astonished that you are so quickly deserting the one who called you by the grace of Christ and are turning to a gospel, to a different gospel, which is really no gospel at all. It's from Galatians. This is a very high-level movement at the speed of heat, walk through the concept of mind control. Why in the world is it so important that you understand this? Because every cult uses the same technique. The words are different, the theology is different, the manipulation is different, but everyone follows this basic path. You don't have to learn every single cultic theology to be effective, but you have to be able to recognize manipulation. Questions?
I had a question. My brother almost got sucked into the Boston Church of Christ.
Yes.
Could you explain kind of what that is and what their beliefs are and how they're structured?
They are basically a works righteousness aberrant Christian organization. So, like most groups, the way they control is they split into smaller units. So they put one person over two people and it moves down in a pyramid so that every person is subjected constantly to scrutiny by the person over them. The Boston movement was a works righteousness aberrant Christian group. John Kelly, who was my exit counseling partner, and his wife both came out of the Boston movement. So it is simply works righteousness defined with a different set of words from Jehovah's Witnesses.
So they really don't have a pastor, do they?
They don't, well, they've gone belly up, praise God. They've gone belly up. They did have a central authority, but it moved all the way through down into the organization where I'm not entirely sure how the local structure was set up, but I do know that the process that they used here that I've just gone through was exactly, this pamphlet was designed in fact, in part with the cooperation of an ex-member of the Boston movement. Yes?
What would you say to the book of James when it says that faith without works is dead?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that.
And also the book of Revelation where it says that people will be judged according to their works. And also the words of Jesus in
Okay.
Matthew when
Thank
he
you.
says, depart from me, you workers of iniquity, I never knew you.
Let me start with James. I had a Jehovah's Witness that hit that.
By
hit
the
me.
way, I'm not a Jehovah's Witness.
What's that?
I'm not a Jehovah's Witness.
No, I know that. No, but I
want
want to address that. Let's take the book of James here. He says, faith without works is dead. Okay. So I said to him, so God needs to see your works to know that you believe. He thought about that for a while. I said, no, God can read my heart. I have to do works so that I can show everybody around me how good a Christian I am. No, that doesn't make sense. Well, what's going on? Because at the end, it says, just as the body without spirit is dead, so grace without works is dead. By the way, the word spirit is also the word breath. So just as the body without breath is dead, so faith without works is dead. Does the body breathe to prove that it is alive? No. The body breathes because it is alive. If your faith is not producing works, you have reason to question your faith. This is the equivalent of a good housekeeping quiz that you take in pencil so you can erase your marks afterwards to learn something about yourself. If you are a believer and you have no works, you need to examine your faith between you and Jesus Christ. Faith without works, it's the equivalent of saying, if you have faith but no works, it is the equivalent of you sitting on a hot barbecue and not getting off. Works grow from faith. And we can't judge each other by that. And so any place where you see works, the works we do, Dietrich Bonhoeffer in the Cost of Discipleship said, don't ever let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. He was talking about the way faith works. When you are operating in faith, you're going to be producing works and you're not even aware of it. Just because of the way you conduct yourself, just because of the way you relate to others. But the minute you turned your mind to, I'm going to do this work, you're back, and why are you going to do it? Well, I want to please God. Pleasing God is a good thing. There is nothing you can do that God needs. The minute you turn to try to do works, you're back onto that road of human effort. Get back up into faith. Let the Spirit guide you to the works that you're going to do. The works will be there, but your concentration, in fact, is going to be on faith and the Spirit, and they're going to be Spirit-guided activities. Does that make sense?
Well, I think that we are to obey God.
We absolutely
and
are.
Obedience results in acts of obedience. And
Okay.
if we don't obey him, it's questionable as to whether
Galatians says that you must continue to do all that is within the law. And you must have done it from the beginning to the end. I blew it. During my teen years, man, did I blow it. But I am no longer on the path of human effort. My whole concentration is tying myself to the Holy Spirit and moving with the Spirit. When good works are a result, so be it. It's no longer through my efforts, it is through the efforts of the Spirit. Those are the kind of works that God treasures. Because I cannot be prideful about anything that God prompts me to do, and it happens. Billy Graham, the Bible verse he had plastered in several rooms of his house comes from the end of Galatians. I resolved never to be prideful, basically is what it says. Of all of the verses that Billy Graham could have had, I would never boast. He understood it. If you are noticing the works that you're doing, your focus is in the wrong area. If you notice it in the wake of your Christian walk, hey, look at that. I never realized that. Then your focus is correct. We are called to faith, not to works.
Do you think it
Out of
takes-
faith comes works.
For some people, though, does it take some human effort to resist certain temptations?
Ah,
Are we talking about?
I fail at that all the time. And the minute I realize that I'm trying real hard to resist a temptation, I also realize that my prayer life and my time spent in the morning preparing myself to walk in concert with God is weak. And that is what I need to do. I cannot resist. My human effort I run out of. But when I start my morning, a practice I love is Lectio Divinas. Reading Psalm 51, my life verse, create in me a pure heart, O God, and restore to me a steadfast spirit. Create. Only He can do it. Only God is capable of creating. God has access to the deep heart of me, within me. I think I own me. I don't. He does.
First, we got a question over here.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't know if you mentioned this. There's that verse that says, He is at work in us to will and to work for His good pleasure. That came to mind with what we just said.
Precisely.
It's He that's working in us.
If it is about human effort, then we've all missed the boat. Because we can do nothing that God cannot do for Himself. If it is about faith, that is a work in itself. Having the discipline to get up in the morning and spending time in the Word and praying for an awareness of the Spirit.
Discipline is human effort.
What's that?
Discipline is human effort. You're talking
It
about
is
discipline.
it is human effort. It is.
But you're denying human effort.
No, I'm not. I'm not. If you take the time to do the discipline, if the human effort is reaching out to God to communicate with Him, if you want to call that human effort, that's fine. I call it strength training. There's a difference. So if I spend my day thinking of good things to do for people, I'm going to feel really proud about all that I do. But if I spend my time concentrating on the Spirit, so that I can try to be aware of the Spirit's leading as I go through the day, anything I do evolves from Him.
All right, we're going to have to break it off there, but we can continue that conversation afterward. Thank you, Bruce. Masterful presentation. Thank you very much. So what we're going to do now, just take a couple minutes real quick while Dennis Ingolsland is going to come up. So grab yourself a snack again, a cup of coffee, and in just like 2 minutes, we'll be ready to go with Dennis Ingolsland on the historical reliability of the Book of Acts.